All right, let's jump right into a pretty wild idea, something that might even feel a little backward at first. What if this constant, relentless chase to improve yourself is actually making things worse? I mean, be honest for a second. Are you just exhausted with all the books, the podcasts, the constant pressure to hack your life? Does it ever feel like you're just on a treadmill that's going faster and faster, but you're not actually getting anywhere? If you feel that way, you are definitely not alone. Writer Mark Manson really hit the nail on the head with this one. It's like our culture has decided that if you're not extraordinary, you're failing. And that insane pressure, that's the fuel for this collective burnout we're all feeling. And that cultural pressure creates something we can call the self-improvement treadmill. It's this endless chase that feels productive, but really it just leaves us exhausted and running in place. A therapist named Jake Ernst really pointed out a crucial shift here. We've moved away from genuine self-work and straight into this obsession with self-optimization. So it's not about reflection anymore. It's about hacking, consuming, and constantly trying to fix a version of you that you've been tricked into believing is broken from the start. And this is what it feels like in practice, right? This line from writer Sarah J. Hauser is just so real. You have this perfect plan to live your best life. But then life happens. The kids get sick, work gets crazy, you're just plain tired. And that gap between the ideal you on Instagram and the real you on the couch becomes this constant source of frustration. So this is where things get a little darker, because this relentless striving, it can actually become a kind of addiction, an addiction to achievement, where you're always chasing a high that never ever lasts. In fact, an article in Psychology Today talks about this not as some kind of virtue, but as a potential disorder. And listen to those words: compulsive, harmful consequences, hijacking the brain like a drug. That's intense, and it should really make us stop and think. And when you break it down, the parallels are kind of scary. That compulsion to just keep chasing the next goal, even when you're burning out, needing bigger and bigger wins to get that same buzz. That's tolerance. And that awful, nagging guilt you feel when you're just trying to rest, that's basically withdrawal. And the craziest part? This whole cycle doesn't even lead to real change most of the time. You just get stuck in this loop of consuming, reading all the books, watching all the videos, but never actually doing anything. You're just feeding the hunger for more information. Okay, so if pushing harder and striving more is actually the problem, what's the solution? Well, this leads us to a really beautiful and counterintuitive idea, the contentment paradox. The idea that real progress starts when you learn to let go. This quote absolutely flips the entire script. It suggests that the foundation for a good life isn't fixing yourself, it's accepting yourself. Because without that foundation, all the improvements in the world are just castles built on sand. It really comes down to two totally different mindsets. We've got the culture of not enough on one side, always fixing, always striving, always looking to the future. And on the other, you have self-acceptance, allowing, embracing, and being grounded in the idea that you are already enough. It's like changing your entire personal operating system. And let's be super clear here, because this is a big one. Acceptance does not mean giving up. It is not resignation. It's actually the opposite. It's about planting your feet on solid ground, on reality, so that real, authentic, lasting change can finally start to grow. Now, I know the idea of letting go can sound a little vague, a little out there. So to make this really concrete, I want to share a powerful metaphor that comes from a story about ambition and burnout. So this writer, Calvin Rosser, he had one single, all-consuming goal: write a book before he turned 30. And he chased it so hard, so relentlessly, that instead of finding fulfillment, he found himself completely and utterly broken by it. This quote is just so raw, so honest. It's that moment when the fight just stops. Not because you won, but because you literally have nothing left in the tank. It's a surrender born from pure exhaustion. And I think a lot of us know exactly what that feels like. And out of that rock bottom moment, he came up with this brilliant metaphor. He realized his ambition was like a rip current in the ocean, and his instinct was to fight it, to swim directly against it with all his might. But anyone who knows the ocean knows that's how you drown. The only way to survive is to stop fighting, let the current carry you for a bit,
and swim parallel to the shore until you're free. What a perfect image for letting go of that forceful striving.
Okay, that's a powerful metaphor, right? But how do we actually do that? How do we practice that kind of surrender in our daily lives? Let's get practical and talk about a few concrete steps we can take. Leo Babauta, who writes about Zen habits, lays out this really simple 3-step path. It's not about some giant life-altering change overnight. It's just about practicing a few key things: building trust with yourself, noticing the impossible standards you're holding, and then gently letting them go. That first step, building self-trust, is just so crucial. Babauta says to think of it like an unreliable friend. If someone keeps making promises and breaking them, you eventually stop trusting them, right? Well, we do that to ourselves all the time when we set huge, unrealistic goals. The answer is to start small. Make tiny promises to yourself that you know you can keep, and slowly, piece by piece, rebuild that trust. And this really gets to the core of those last 2 steps. That feeling of being not good enough doesn't actually come from who you are. It comes from the huge, painful gap between the real you and some perfect, imaginary ideal you have in your head. The practice is simple. First, just notice that ideal. See the stress it's causing. And then, with some kindness, just let it go.
So, I just want to leave you with this one question. In a world that is constantly screaming at you to be more, do more, and become better, what would happen if you just stopped and considered this? What if, right here, in this very moment, with all your flaws and all your imperfections, you are already enough?